So if you're familiar with the writings of Khalil Gibran, particularly if you've read The Prophet, great masterful work there. In fact, I'm moving the Flames of Faith till the end because I'm going to do it up a little different today. But you may not know that Khalil Gibran and most of those writings are attributed to the Baha'i faith. And the Baha'i faith, very, very in line with New Thought, is the understanding of service to all, one humankind, one power. And he wrote an essay called On Work. And I thought that that was appropriate for Labor Day. And one of the things that is a constant reminder to us on this idea of laboring as we look at this both from the physical perspective and spiritual perspective is the fact that we are always at choice with how we labor. Sometimes not what we do in terms of laboring, but how we do the labor. And towards the end of his piece called On Work, he said, "Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And if you sing, though, as angels and love not the singing, you muffle man's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night." So this idea of laboring, in the book of Matthew, it says that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So when I look at Khalil Gibran's words and I look at those in the book of Matthew, what it's telling us is that this opportunity of laboring, of doing the work that we as human beings are offered to do, that the main intention behind that work should be love. Now, how many of you have had jobs and work that you did not love? And how many of us have been seduced in that massive expression that all of human beings tend to do, and that is to complain about the work? And what we know by spiritual law is that what we complain about, we just produce more of. And it's a strange day when we come across the concept to love all things at all times, all people at all times. And we realize that that seems to be a massive undertaking in terms of humanity's clarion call in behavior, in consciousness, and in action, to love all things at all times. And so when we are doing something that we do not love, rare is that moment of awareness where in that doing, in the grudging of that doing, that we stop and we go, oh, wait a minute, if I continue to do this, I only continue to get more of that. Let me change my reference and stand up and turn around and face the moon and hug my leg and do all the things that I need to do to reset in order to be able to love. And usually what happens is it takes a catastrophe of some sort. It takes a firing. Any of you ever been fired before? Have you ever been fired from something that you hated? And yet even being fired in something that you hated, you're like, oh, what? Realizing the inevitability and the door opening that's being provided for us to move into something in greater alignment. And it's no small feat then, what you and I have been called to do as we labor as human beings. Labor as human beings, but also being a spiritual being, and the coalescing of those two things. So in our humanity, we are constantly in school. We are constantly being afforded to go, am I doing this from a place of pure intent? Am I doing this out of obligation? Am I doing this out of bitterness and anger? Or am I doing this out of love? And if we were to scorecard each other this morning as we, poll, and I put a little thing on your finger that was a lie detector test, and I go, okay, where's your love aptitude? It would be interesting to see what our measurements are and what is room for improvement. But what I know is that till the day that we take our last breath, there will always be room for improvement. And so I am in awe of Mother Nature. By nature, I'm talking about one of the greatest teachers that we have. You know, the storms come not because we, in our humanity, have done anything wrong. The storms come because that's what storms do. Nature just does its thing, and sometimes we happen to live in the path of nature. You know, the storms don't come as punishment. The fires don't happen because of anything necessarily that we've done, but these things tend to happen a lot of times, and we just happen to have geographically placed ourselves in the middle of that. Now, that being said, we also have a responsibility by the way in which we influence some of these things through nature, through our delusion of pollution, and the way in which that which is climate change is real, #science is real, affords us the opportunity to create reconciliation in the way in which we labor. And so all of this, when you couple all of this and the idea of laboring, and the idea of laboring with love, and the idea of always aligning our humanity with our spirituality, our work will never be done. And I want to speak a little bit this morning about your fatigue. The fatigue that your spirit might have when we look at the landscape of the world and go, how will I ever be able to labor with love when I can barely lift my head off of the pillow? How can I labor with love when it feels as though everything that I do doesn't really produce any tangible results? How can I labor with love when I feel as though I'm doing everything that my spirituality calls me to do, but I don't see the instant manifestation? And I think that those are really concrete questions. Those are real viable things that we are afforded to ask ourselves. And the only solution that I can offer you this morning is this, is that in the trusting that law is always taking place, we will not be able to see the tangibility if we are constantly in opposition to the love. Love sometimes requires us to stop and to become very, very still in our laboring, and to be able to look and to know that if I'm comparing my labor to someone else, if I'm comparing my output or my outcome to those who might have degrees behind their name, then my laboring will always be in vain. But to the person who picks up my trash, to the core of men who came in and cut down trees in my yard last week, to the person who is the clerk at the store, to whatever it is that you do in your life, all of that laboring is a platform for love. And when we do that from love, then as we grow and as we outgrow, we move from the stage of outgrow to growth, not in resistance and not in name calling and not in finger pointing, but in love. And as we spiral and move forward in that right alignment of what it is that is ours to labor in, then wherever we go, we will be providing not bitter bread, but we will be providing sustenance to those that are in our direct field of influence. And so we are called upon to look at our intentions and our thoughts and our ideas about our own life, and to understand that we are all laborers. We are all laborers. And what it is that we are giving birth to is a product of the quality of our laboring. And so that means that in the laboring process, I must find that set point within me that is willing to be loving and celebratory, even when I don't like necessarily what it is that I'm doing. How do I do that? How do I reframe that? It's the difference between complaining and understanding. When I complain, I was sharing this with someone this morning, when I complain, there's a finality to that. My complaint is, this is so, and I offer no solution. But when I am uncomfortable, when I'm discontented, when I'm in the midst of that outgrowing, when I am in my labor pains, what I realize is that something new is wanting to be birthed. That's the difference between complaining and being in pure intent in my laboring. I know that this too shall pass, or this is a stepping stone towards more of what it is that I am to do. And if I don't understand the distinguishment between those two things, then I will always be in the finality of complaining. If we understand spiritual law, what does that tell us then? The very thing that I'm complaining about will perpetuate, and I will continue to be engaged in the art of complaining. To love and to labor in love means that we are people of pure intent. We're not complaining about what is. We are solution driven. And this month, as we look at service, how can any of us do anything service oriented if what we're doing is complaining? But what we do is we look at the situation, and we might not, and we never will be actually able to see the entire staircase, but we do know that there is a step before us to take. So how many of you complained in your life? I was thinking about my history of complaining, because my mentor passed this week. I loved me some Louise Hay, and I was just laughing about, I was about 28, 29 years old, and I was fortunate enough to be in a vocal trio and to travel with Louise for several years. And there were many nights in a van, traveling God knows where, parked in a 7-Eleven, you know, trying to get a Slurpee or something after an event. And this was back in the day before cell phones. Yes, I am that old. And I was an actor. And so what you did as an actor was you always had to be in communication with your agent. And of course, they couldn't call you because there was no cell phone. So this is me in the van constantly, year after year. I need to find a payphone. I have to call my agent. Because if I had auditioned for something, the only way that I was going to know if there was a callback or what my position was in my laboring was to get on the phone. And so they would always, everybody in the van would always be, David, there's a payphone, or David needs to call his agent. And I remember one night, parked at a 7-Eleven, I think it was like Bartlesville. Have any of you ever been to Bartlesville, California? It's in the middle of nowhere, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain. And I'm in a van, and it's late, and everybody's tired because we've been doing some event, and there's a payphone at a 7-Eleven. And I call, and I just knew that I was going to get this job. I just knew that this pilot that I had filmed was going to get picked up for series. And I call my agent, and my agent says no, they passed on it. And I storm back to that van, and I sit like this next to Louise, and she goes, honey, what's wrong? And I just said, if I hadn't been born in the family that I was born in, if I had a different pedigree, this wouldn't be happening. I would be getting these jobs. So I wanted to blame everything, including being born in Beaumont, Texas, and to the family that I was born. That was the reason why I wasn't getting cast. And she said, oh, honey. And she had said this many times about honoring the entirety of my journey. She goes, what can you love about right now? And she goes, look at this 7-Eleven. Why would you want to be anyplace else but right here? And she just had this way of diffusing my immature complaining. And I'm so appreciative of having some stability like that. And I know that each of us has that stability there, that wisdom voice that's saying, is that really the way in which you want to respond? Is that really the tone by which you want to labor in? Or is there a way for you to find something to be grateful for in this moment? And when we look at the words again of Khalil Gibran, the actual piece starts off like this: you work that you may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. For to be idle is to become a stranger unto the seasons and to step out of life's procession that marches in majesty and proud submission towards the infinite. I love the idea of you and I being in submission to love. What happens when we submit? We let go of our need to control the way it has to look. If you're going to be in submission to the energy of love. And let that particular energy field, that system, be the way that influences the work that you do. And here's the thing. You and I must be grateful now, not for when that job is over, but be grateful for the job that is there before us now. If the job isn't there and a job is wanted, be grateful for the job that is coming, rather than complaining about not having the job. Instead of looking at the world through the lens of complaint and finger pointing, who am I to know what Joel Osteen should have done? But what I do know is that how convenient is it for me to displace my own self-hatred onto another. That's what scapegoating is. And so, ye, I'm included in that, ye who is without fault, cast the first stone. So it isn't our job to continuously point at something and continue to fault find, but it is our job to look for solution. And in the opportunity of that, that is where then the laboring, our spiritual laboring, continues to be fertile in its birthing. I bet that you understand now that there is a world that hungers for that level of understanding. There is a world that craves those of us who love what we do. Because when we love what we do, then the byproduct of what it is that we do has an energy to it that heals the world. Can you imagine if you were a clerk and you loved what you do, that everything that you sold to the customer would be infused with the energy of that love? If you are a social worker, if you are a musician, if you are an artist, if you are a writer, if you are a lawyer, if you are a doctor, if you are a software salesperson, if you are anything and you do it with love, what you do isn't final. It doesn't have a finality to it with regards to the exchange of goods and services. What it does is it perpetuates a ripple effect of energy that is healing. And so our laboring then is not just about the physical labor, but it is about the spiritual laboring of understanding what we are giving birth to. That is what is ours to do. And Penelope, if you will noodle behind me with love. Yes. I want you to think about all of these main religions. And this is something new that I want you to think about, that in the body of these individuals who worship or are in alignment with these different religions, that these people all across our planet are also hurting, are also facing natural catastrophes, are also misunderstanding in terms of what it is that is theirs to do with laboring. And I believe that prayer and the acknowledgement of prayer and the intent of prayer knows no boundaries. So that means that as you pray and as we acknowledge these religions this morning, that it does go out of the physical space of this room. And it does permeate through the ethers, and it is felt, and it is tangible. So I want you to labor this morning. And in your prayerful laboring, right where you are in your seat, I want you to make the acknowledgement of these religions and all of the people across the face of the planet who consider these religions their home, their sanctuary. That from you, they feel as though they are seen, that they are heard, and that they are valued. And so we perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples and all faiths and all sentient beings come from the one great universal presence which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all spiritual and religious thought, which we honor here this morning. And so whatever your POV is in the room, just make your way down the 10 candles. And the first candle is for the Tao. So pause for a moment. Anyone who considers the Tao to be their path, if they are hurting today, if they are affected by some divisive governmental interaction, if they are struggling because of some calamity or disaster, send them their love. And we honor the universal path of harmony and equilibrium that the Tao call the natural way. We light the candle for the shamanic traditions. And as we honor the beliefs and the practices of all indigenous peoples, we also pray for them and send to them our love so that their practices are not frowned upon or overridden or overpowered by consumerism, but that what is sacred to them with regards to land, with regards to people, with regards to what it is that they love, their way of primal spirituality is honored in this moment by our prayers. We light the candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge and action and devotion. And we know that right now all of those of the Hindu faith who are experiencing whatever turmoil they might be faced with in this world, that through the alignment of their brothers and sisters, that relief is known to them right here and right now in this moment. We light the candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law, and continuing to make a deep amends for the way in which humanity's missteps and atrocities shown towards this faith have held and oppressed. And we ask that the deliverance of that oppression continue to be known now in this moment. Number 5 is the candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and what is known to them as a path of compassion. And our prayer is now that the ancient laboring of those who have aligned with this particular spiritual path realize that their laboring has not been in vain, and that all that they are aligned with continues to reciprocate back to them with peace and with love and with harmony. Number 6 is the candle for all forms of Christianity. And our prayer is that the true definition of Christ consciousness, which isn't about condemnation, but which is about celebration of that which is the love of the master teacher who taught by example that we love our neighbor as ourselves. It is that path of love which we honor in prayer today. We light the candle for all forms of Islam, honoring that path of that beautiful submission to the will of that which is known as God, as the highest calling. And may that which is the division of that religion, a religion which at its core is love, be returned back. And that all of those who are pure and are innocent and are struggling, that follow this path, find the sustenance and the care and the love that they need in order to restore themselves back to the Sacred Heart. We light the candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace, and knowing that all those that practice the Baha'i faith and their doctrine of one God, one people, one source, one faith is seen, and that it permeates without obstruction into this world. And number 9 is the candle for all forms of new thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. And for all of us who call ourselves a part of the New Thought movement, may our actions be congruent with that which is love. May the understanding of the power of thought be enough to create the reset within us, so that all that we do and that all that we speak and all that we are is once again returned to the congruency of that which is love. And lastly is the healing candle. And I would like to take this morning the opportunity for us to place into the flame of that 10th candle all of those who are affected by the events that are happening in our world today. You may not realize this, but not only are there great floods in our own nation because of the hurricane, but there are unprecedented floods that are happening throughout India. There are the fires now that are raging through California. There is so much in our news that can make us feel overwhelmed. And for whatever feels appropriate to your heart right now, will you take a moment and you look into one of these flames and you put into that illumination your intent to be a spiritual laborer of solution, and to do whatever it is that you can to be of conscious service. And will you breathe together with me? And the beautiful thing about how we end our prayer is that we now take our need to control the way of how, and we leave it open-ended for that which is spirit, the spirit of solution, to do it in the way that is best. And if you are in harmony with that, the way that we end our prayer is this. And so it is. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.